My friends, aloha. Aloha. And I say that because I know a lot of you. This is great and exciting. The last time I spoke here, I was fairly new to the island and I didn't know hardly anybody. And so I feel good. I see all these great faces that I know out here. And thank you, Marcia. She's my TA. Big props to her. I love her so much. She does so much good for us. So what I thought I'd do today is maybe cover 5 subjects. Okay, and I'm going to tell you stories from my life as we go through these subjects. One of the things that happens when you get older, and there's only 2 people in this room that could probably understand that, is when you get to be my age, you forget that you're my age. I feel like I'm your age in my head. I think like you do. When I see like people jumping off Laie Point, I'm like, I can do that. When I see people lifting things, I'm like, of course I can do that. And so what's interesting is when you finally sit down and start to talk about business and being an entrepreneur, etc., I find it funny because I sit and I look and go, oh, I'm so old. In order to get all this experience, life really had to go by, because some of these experiences took years for me to learn and for me to develop. So as was mentioned, I grew up in Southern California. I just want you to know that despite all of my faults and all of the bad things that I've done in my life, I cannot blame any of them on my parents. Okay, they were great people, and I had a great childhood growing up. So I know sometimes that's not the case with people, and as I look for reasons and places and people I can blame for all my bad things, I can't blame my parents. I really can't blame anybody, can you? Just real quick. When I was young, I had no idea I wanted to be in the food service business. But what I have found is that throughout my life, and I want to give first credit to the Lord, because throughout my life, the Lord has been involved in the details of my life. And not just spiritually, not in my callings only, but in my job, in my direction that I was going, even down to whether I should pour concrete on a certain day in a new restaurant or wait a week. Even those kinds of details. But the Lord has blessed me more than I deserve. I want you to know that. More than I deserve. And so when I was younger, the last time I spoke here, I told a story about how I had 2 teachers. And one was an English teacher, one was a math teacher who told me in front of the class that in both cases I was the dumbest student that they had ever met. And so you can imagine English and math were never my greatest subjects because I had this cloud over myself because of what these teachers had said to me. So I never really thought much about my career. In fact, to be honest with you, I had an uncle who was pretty successful in the insurance business, so I thought, I'll just go into the insurance business. That's what Uncle Gary does. And then when I found out what insurance people do, I went, that's not me. It didn't fit me, so I didn't know what to do. So I went to school, I joined the Marine Corps, I went on a mission to Toronto, Canada. I did the things that I was supposed to do, and I thought I'll figure it out. At one point I was pretty darn sure that I needed to be a police officer, I needed to be a cop. And one of the things that I forgot to put in my bio is that later in life when I sold my restaurants, I was able to go and become a sheriff's deputy for 2 years, and I was able to live that dream. So I've actually been a cop, and it was probably one of the greatest 2 years of my life. Okay, I really loved it because I could tase people, I could spray people, I could beat people up, and I could handcuff them, and it was really a lot of fun. And I think that should happen to bad guys, by the way. So bad guys don't deserve a lot of kindness. They deserve to be tased and sprayed and put in the back of a car. So I got to do that, and so I've been very blessed. But in the beginning, I didn't know what I wanted to do. In fact, what happened is I was coming back from the beach one day and living in California. I was in San Diego, and I stopped by a restaurant that I thought was selling sandwiches, and they weren't selling sandwiches. They were not open yet, and the district manager was in there, and he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Oh, I thought you were open." He said, No, we're not open, but we're looking for workers. And I said, no, not me. I don't do food, that would be awful. And then he said, well, we pay X amount. I can't remember what it was, $3.10 an hour or something, exorbitant. And he says, we're looking for somebody to come in the afternoon and pan up our bread for our baker who works 2 in the morning till 11 in the morning. And I thought, wow, I could school, I could beach, I could surf, I could do all these things. So I said, yeah, I might be interested. So I got involved. By chance, I stopped at that restaurant. That was the beginning of the rest of my life in food. From there, I became an assistant manager for this bakery. It was called La Petite Boulangerie, which means the small bakery. And it was all up and down from San Francisco all the way through San Diego. It was owned by Pepsi Cola at the time, PepsiCo. And I became an assistant manager. I was trained as a French baker, worked as a baker from 2 in the morning to 11, became a manager, and then finally was promoted to be a district manager. From there, I was recruited to go to Houston, Texas with Jack in the Box, where I was a district manager, then I was an area manager, then I was moved as a VP of franchising in Mesa over 5 states, and then moved back to Nashville, Tennessee to be over operations. And in that time, we built 26 Jack in the Box restaurants in 24 months from scratch. And then from there, I became a franchisee of Sonic. I started with 8, and in 8 years, I went from 8 to 80. And in 2009, I sold those restaurants. And that's when I became a sheriff's deputy. I wanted to try it out. After 2 years, my wife said, enough is enough, Maples. Those bruises, and you've got grandkids, you need to stop. And so she said, do something different. And so then I went and was recruited to come over to Subway and Winchell's Donuts as their COO. And that's where I was when I was brought here. And I am a director of the Hukilau Marketplace, which has Pounders, all of the marketplace, and concessions inside the villages. And so my life has been great, but I didn't plan on a food life, but I fell into it. And what I found is that I never would have found it if the Lord hadn't nudged me in the right direction. And so one of the things I want to tell you is listen to those promptings as you're looking for what you want to do in your life. Listen to the promptings, and don't cross out things that you say, I would never do that. Because I was the guy that said, I will never work in fast food. Okay? Well, it's 34 years later, guess what? It's my passion. I found my love. And so what I was thinking about is, well, what are some of the things that I could tell you after 34 years in the business? And so I'm going to break it down into 5 quick areas, and I'm going to tell you some stories along the way about things that happened to me. First thing I learned very early in life, and I wish, and I'm telling you these things because if I could go back in time and tell myself at your age things that I would want to know, or not even that you don't even know you want them yet, but the things that you need to hear, I would go back to my past and I would tell myself these things. And the first thing that I learned is that I was enough, that I had enough talent, that I had enough of everything that I needed to be successful. No matter what the world told me, I had enough. Now, many of you have heard the story of the genie. I actually have a genie's lamp, one on my nightstand and one in my office. If you go to my office, you'll see a genie's lamp about that big, made from brass. And it's to remind me of something, the story of the genie. When you rub the genie's lamp, what happens? Sean, do you know the story? You don't know it. Okay, that's okay. What happens when you rub the lamp? Genie comes out. Okay, genie says what? Okay, he says, your wish is my command. And you get 3 wishes, right? If you follow that story back to when it originated, there were unlimited wishes. But man, in his infinite wisdom, said, unlimited wishes is not fair. So we're going to make the story only have 3 wishes. And what you can't wish for what? More wishes, right? That part of the story is all man-made. The original story was, when you rub the lamp, the genie came out, and the genie says, your wish is my command, and you had unlimited wishes. And so what I will tell you is that I've learned in my life is that as you rub the lamp, don't limit yourself. Because you do that. We do that. It's human nature. And we have the adversary who's beating on us in all the ways that he does. And we limit ourselves and we say, I can't do that. I'm not good at that, or I'm not enough, or I'm not all this. Let me just tell you, you are. You are enough. So put that behind you. So the first thing I want to incorporate here is something that I call performance is the equalizer. I used to have shirts made that would have that, I had a logo and it would say performance is the equalizer, because talk means nothing. You're going to come across people in your life that do a lot of talking. They have a lot of great plans. They come with plans and they have talk, and they're really excited about plans and plans and plans. Let me tell you something. I have never in my life, my adult life, been able to cash a plan in and deposit it in the bank. I've never been able to do that. Okay, talk is cheap. Performance is the equalizer. Okay, and let me tell you, that's the way it's going to be in life. When you're an elders quorum president, or you're a bishop and you're looking for your priesthood or relief society to, back in the old days, do home teaching, okay, performance meant that they went and visited their families, right? And the people who didn't minister or didn't do their families, those were problem people in your ward, because you had to go and do their job. There's no different in church, or whether it is in your school, or whether it's in your family, or whether it's in your business. Performance is the equalizer, and get used to it. Get used to being a performer. There's two kinds of people in business. There's the make-ems and the spend-ems. Okay, now, this is being recorded, so I have to be really careful. If it wasn't being recorded, I might tell you a little more, but I'm afraid that some of the spend-ems might be watching this later. In the world of make-ems and spend-ems in the fast food world, and let's take Jack in the Box for example. Guys like me who were in operations, who were on the ground in the restaurants, managing anywhere from 12 to 250 restaurants or whatever it is, or at one point 1,800 restaurants, whatever that number is, we were making the money. Without us, without those operations people, there was no money being made, there was no hamburgers being cooked, no money getting into the bank. If we didn't show up, the company goes under, right? There's nobody delivering what the company does. But if somebody in training doesn't show up, nobody cares. Steve's smiling. He's back there, Brother Lundgren smiling like, oh, Maples. So make-ems are people who are performing. Spend-ems, now you have to have spend-ems, don't you? You have to have HR departments, you have to have accounting departments, you have to have training departments, you have to all of those. But in my world where I come from, those are make-ems and spend-ems. Okay? Those departments spend money. They don't make money. Now one could argue, yes, without them you can't make all the money you need and all of that stuff. But what I have found that in my life, I want to be where the make-ems are. I want to be in the operations. It's harder, okay, because HR people, they work Monday through Friday, and they get President's Day off, and they get to go home at night. And operations guys, we don't. But I want to be a make-em. And I'm glad I had that instilled in me, because later as I became an owner of businesses, it helped me to understand that you have to have performance, you have to make them. So I want to be a make them in my life, okay? I don't want to be a spend them. That doesn't mean I don't want to be in HR or training and all that. I have parts of my job that I do that are not necessarily, that are more spend thems than make thems at times. But overall, when I was your age, I want to be a make them. I want to be somebody who is in the operations doing that. But regardless of whether you become a make 'em or a spend 'em, whether you're in training HR, and there's nothing wrong with those career paths. If you've been in my class, you know that I love those people. But you have to understand something. If you're in HR or not, you have to be a performer. Okay? You have to be a performer. The other point number 2 that I'd make is that you need to learn to work hard. I want to give you some examples of what working hard may look like. Working hard doesn't mean just getting up early to go to class. It doesn't mean you're going to just do what you're doing at school. I'm talking about the life of your career. You've got to learn to work hard. Now, one of the things that happened to me when I was young is I got promoted up the ranks very quick and very young. So I was always up against a whole bunch of guys and ladies that were older than I was. They were always older than I was. When I became a district manager at Jack in the Box, I think I might have been 25, 26 years old. Okay, so I was very young. The average age of the other 11 district managers in Houston, Texas was well over 40. Okay? And man, they beat me up constantly about my age. You know, you don't know anything, you haven't been around, you don't know the business, you know, and they just pummeled me. And they were right. I didn't have the experience that they had, but I did know one thing that they didn't, and that is I could work them under the table. I could work harder than they could. And so I did things like I would come in the morning at 6 a.m. and I would get all of my office work done and turn in all the business assignments and things that we had to do. And then I'd be out the door before the office opened and out into the field visiting restaurants. And I remember my secretary came to me one time and she was chuckling, and her name was Becky, and she said, "Hey, I got to tell you a funny story." And I said, "Go ahead." She said, "Yeah, I was sitting at my desk and 3 of the district managers came around and they started laughing." And she said, I asked them, "What are you laughing at?" And they said, "We're just laughing because that little guy Maples is going to get in so much trouble." She said, "What's he going to get in trouble about? He's not even here. He's not going to turn in the assignment on time. Alwyn Lewis, who was our boss, is going to kill him. And he's, obviously, what is he, sleeping in?" And she smiled and said, "Actually, he's already been to the office, turned in his assignments, and done all of his office work, and he's already in his first restaurant." And these 40 to 50-year-old guys, their mouth just dropped. And I only tell you that because I didn't have the experience, and I didn't know all that they knew and all the ins and outs. But what I did know is, until I did know those things, I could work hard, and I could work really hard. In fact, when I became a manager of La Petite Boulangerie, I didn't know how to manage. They didn't have a great training program. And in the middle of my being a manager, my baker quit. The baker works from 2 in the morning till 11 in the morning. So as the manager, I'd come in around 6 to 7 in the morning and work till 5 at night. So I didn't know how. I didn't know how to manage. I didn't have. My bakery was in La Jolla, California, right on Girard Street. If you know that, I see a smile. You know that area very well. Okay, beautiful place, very rich. To find somebody to come in for the wages we were paying to work 2 in the morning to 11 in La Jolla, California, it's pretty slim to none. So it took me a long time to find somebody who could do that job. In the meantime, I came in at 2 in the morning. I would take an 8-hour bake, and I learned to do it in 4 hours. And I would do it from 2 to 6. I would change my clothes, comb my hair, and then I would go open the bakery at 6, and I'd work till 5. And I did that for 366 days in a row. We weren't closed on Sunday. 7 days a week, 366 days without a break. I did that until I finally was able to get a baker who can come in. And then shortly after that, I was promoted to district manager. Now, I'm not telling you, I know some of you might be thinking this, I'm not telling you to go work 366 days in a row. What I'm telling you is you got to be willing to do those things. And I was willing to do it because I knew that I was a 23-year-old that didn't know anything about anything, and the best thing I could do is just work really, really hard. So when I first got to Jack in the Box as a district manager, they took the company down to Puerto Vallarta. I'm sorry, it was Acapulco. We went to Acapulco on this business convention retreat, and every year they gave out this really great award for the best region. And I can't remember the name of the award. I tried to remember it. I tried to look it up. I can't remember it. But it was this very prestigious award. And our region in Houston was the worst region in the company at the time. So my boss, who had been my boss at La Petite, brought me over to Houston with the idea that we were going to turn this place around. So when we got done with this award show, he pulled all of the district managers, all of the people that came from Houston together, and he said, "Let me tell you something. I'll never be so embarrassed as I was tonight. Next year, we're going to win this award. We're going to go from last to best." What did I do? I went to my hotel room and I wrote an action plan for the year. The other 11 district managers, they went out and got drunk, passed out on the beach, went out and partied, and didn't even come back until the middle of the morning. But I went back and wrote an action plan. I said, I'm going to write a plan, and I'm going to make it so that not only does the region make it, but they gave one out for District Manager of the Year, too, for the entire Jack in the Box company. I wanted to have that as well. I'll just tell you this. Over the next couple of years, all 11 of those district managers were either laid off, fired, or left on their own. None of them stayed. But I will tell you this. 1 year later, the region, we were the #1 region in the company 1 year later, and I stood on that stage and took the Best District Manager Award. I know that's exciting, Sean. But I didn't just say, well, that's great, boss. But I didn't know what else to do. So I went up and I wrote an action plan, and I ran, as soon as we got back to the airport, I ran into my district and started to roll it out to my people. I paid attention to the details and worked hard. After I sold my restaurants and became a sheriff's deputy, I also was a little bored, so I started a landscape company. I thought, you know what? I'm going to start a landscape company because I look at the fast food world, the food world, as a circle. And anything that touches my world, I'm willing to get involved in. Okay, so for example, pest control, landscape, things that I know because of restaurants. Okay, I'm willing to get involved with. But if somebody came and said, Greg, I think we really need to start an IT company, I'd say, yeah, I'm not that guy. Okay, because it's not in my world. But landscape was, and I knew landscaping. I knew what the right kind of landscaping would be, and so I started it. But let me tell you something. That was hard. This was after I sold my restaurants. I had made a lot of money. I didn't have to work this hard, and so I maybe hadn't worked that hard in a while. I was used to playing golf all day on Fridays and taking trips and stuff. But when I got bored with that and started to work, it was hard. And I found out for the first year, me and one guy, we worked 6 days a week, 6 in the morning till the sun went down. And I rode a mower, and I learned how to do the zero turn, and I bought equipment, and we started going. And right before we moved from Nashville, I was able to sell that company for quite a bit of money. But it started out, it was very hard. It was very hard, and I did work hard. And when I got here, after all the years of experience, when I got here, and my first assignment was to turn Pounders around, one of the things some of you who were there at that time know that I never left the restaurant. I was there from the time it opened till the time it closed, 6 days a week. I just stayed there. There were times I would get up on Sunday morning and my hands were so swollen that I could barely pinch them to take the sacrament because I was so tired, because I wasn't 20 anymore. Okay, and working 70 hours on your feet every day for a 50-year-old is a lot tougher, maybe 55-year-old, is a lot tougher than it was when I was in my 20s. But I did it because I had to, because I knew that was the recipe that needed to be implemented to be able to do it. And so I want to tell you something. Remember, performance is the equalizer. Remember that you're going to have to work hard. Don't shun hard work. Don't do it. What time should I finish?
About 40 after.
Okay, perfect. And I know that sometimes we get sick of hearing people talk about how we need to work hard, we need to work hard. But let me tell you something. Do it now while you're young so you can enjoy the benefits later in life. Don't slack now and then have to be older and learn how to work hard. It is not the right way to do it. Learn now and embrace that. Okay, point number 3 is this. When the times got tough, I stuck it out. Now, most of you weren't even born at this time, but in 1993 at Jack in the Box, there was a crisis that took place. It was the E. coli 0157H7 crisis. And that's where we had hamburgers up in the Seattle area that were tainted with an E. coli pathogen that would kill people. And because children and the elderly are more susceptible, this was caused because of some uncooked meat. And several children died because of eating Jack in the Box meat. Okay, this was in 1993. It was horrible. Our sales plummeted 30%. 30%. Now, you may not can grasp the importance of that, but if your sales in a restaurant or in a business drop 30%, you immediately have a hard time paying your bills, paying your not only your rent, but paying your payroll. Jack in the Box as a chain dropped 30%. So we were in deep trouble. Many of my friends who were working at Jack in the Box, when times got tough, and tough meaning they came to us and said, look, in order for us to make it through this crisis, we need everybody to take a 10% pay cut, and field people, you got to put your own gas in your company car. Now, I've had a company car before I owned my restaurants. I had a company car from the time I was 23 until I was 38, almost 40 years old. And they always paid for the gas. But in 1993, they said, we're going to take a 10% pay cut and you're going to pay for your gas. Now, my district, I lived in the northern part of Houston, was on the very south part of Houston. It'd be like driving from here to Mililani every day. okay, something like that. But I did it. Many of the friends that I had, they left. They said, I'm not doing this. This is too hard. They're asking too much. I'm not going to do it. And so they left the company and they went off with other ones. And what most of them happened is they never found a home. They kind of jumped around in their careers until finally they just kind of drifted off. And then some of them, I don't even know where they're at. But there were some people in charge of Jack in the Box at the time. It was Bob Nugent, Ken Williams, Paul Schultz, Jim Matthews, and my direct supervisor, Jim Beckham. In 1993, I remember the faces and the names of all 5 of these men. I trusted that they knew where we were going and they were going to get Jack in the Box out of it. So I stuck with it. We worked harder than we've ever worked before. Many times I'd be in a restaurant and people would come up and they would say, I just wanted to come in and tell you I'm not going to eat here because you're baby killers. And because you kill babies. And people would protest against us and it was awful. And in order to get our sales back, we had to do some really tremendous discounting, which caused a lot of work in the restaurant. But what we did is we found joy in our journey, and those of us who bound together during that tough time ended up staying with Jack in the Box, and I knew all of them until it was at the end of my 15 years when I left. But I didn't give up. Too many times when things get tough, we give up. Don't give up. Stick it out. I don't know what I would have done if I had left Jack in the Box. It became such a great experience for me those 15 years. It became the foundation of what I needed to later do what I needed to do in life. A lot of the things that I do today is because of the 15 years of the foundation that I built at Jack in the Box and the leaders that touched my life. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. It was very hard to leave Jack in the Box. 15 years, I had 6 weeks vacation, I had status, I had all this going on. To leave it was really, really tough. In fact, one of the toughest parts was I had family members that would tell me through my years of being in the food business, could you just do something different? And I'd say, why? They say, it's so embarrassing to tell people that my brother, my son, my nephew, my cousin is in fast food. Especially around 1993, I had lots of family members say, it's so hard to tell people that you're a fast food guy. But I found my passion. That's what I loved. I love everything about it. In fact, if you've taken my class, one of the things I say is I hope the celestial kingdom has the smell of bacon cooking. Because, man, I love the smell of bacon cooking in a restaurant. I love the smell of a clean, bleached floor. That smell of the bleach and of the mop that's just a little dirty and should have been changed, and you just know it. It's like a fine wine. You smell the bouquet. I love that. I love that. When you come in the morning and you hear the registers being changed, being put inside the register, and you hear them putting in, I love that sound. I love that sound. And so I hope that people love whatever they're going to do the way I love that. And all my children I've told, I don't care what you do in life. Just love it like your dad loves food. Love it like your dad loves what he does every day. I don't care what you do. One son went on to be a sheriff's deputy. One son's still twirling around, deciding what he's going to do. Some of you know him. Zach, he plays games with you. Yeah. You shouldn't be playing so many video games with him, Kelvin. I know. But even though when my family was telling me to get out of the business, I knew this was my passion and I didn't get out. Now what's funny is later in life, some of those same people would end up working for me and today are retired with ownership in some of the Sonic drive-ins that I built. So you see how it kind of went around in circles? I wonder what would have happened if I had jumped out because they told me to jump out. Number 4 is I continue to educate myself. So formal education is a must in today's world. Get your formal education. But I want to tell you a story. When I was going for a promotion to be over franchising, I had to write a paper, kind of an annual review, kind of a fake one, and then they would evaluate it. So part of the interview process was that. So I went through the interview, I did okay personally, but I got a phone call from the vice president and said to me, I'm reading your paper and I just got a question. Sure. They said, who wrote this? Oh, now remember I had an English teacher back in 8th grade tell me I was the dumbest student they ever met, so English wasn't my forte and I was a little nervous about it. And I thought, ooh, this is a trick question. And I said, I did. And they said, yeah, that's the problem. This is written horribly. This is written like an 8th grader. Literally said that. I remember 8th grade, Mr. Cameron told me I was the worst student ever. It devastated me that this vice president would say this to me. She said, yeah, it's written like an 8th grader. There's no way we could have you in this position. There's no way you'll get promoted. I was devastated. I remember standing in my bedroom taking this phone call. I hung up the phone and I was just so brokenhearted. And my wife came in and said, what's the matter? And I told her, and she said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, what do you mean what I'm going to do about it? I didn't get the job. I didn't get promoted. She says, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your writing skills. What are you going to do about it? I thought, that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear, oh, come here, honey. Let me go make you some of your favorite something. And, let's go out to eat or something, like that. But that isn't what she said. So I didn't say anything and I thought about it. And then I kind of got a little ticked. I thought, you know what? I've lived with this too long. So I went to Rice University and I took a class on writing. And I took the class twice because I was so bad at it. And funny thing happened. About 6 months later, she called me and said, you know what? The guy who we had take that position didn't work out, but we really liked you. Would you be willing to interview again? I said, sure, I would. So I said, but I want to write the review. I want to do the review. And she said, well, we know how that turned out, and we'll work with you. I said, no, I want to do it again. So we went through the whole process again, and when she called me back the next time, she said, who wrote this? And I said, I did. And she goes, well, I don't believe you. And I said, wow, really? Why? She goes, because it's so good. She goes, given where you were 6 months ago and where you are now, did your secretary write this? I said, absolutely not. I wouldn't do that. And then I told her the process that I went through. So she verified with my boss that I had actually taken this class because the company paid for the class and all of that. And I got that job. And that was the next step for me to go on and do bigger and greater things. But I had been turned down. You know how humiliating that was? My peers knew that I got turned down. My peers knew why I got turned down. That was humiliating to me. And it was reinforcing what a teacher had told me many years ago. But instead of caving in, I continued to educate myself. I went to Rice University, took a writing class, and now I actually am on the cusp of, in the 2019, of actually publishing my first book. Yeah, a guy who was the stupidest guy in 8th grade and who didn't get a job is now going to publish a book. Life is just funny, but don't stop educating yourself. Every year I read a certain amount of books. Now today back in the old days they didn't have Audible. They didn't have where you can listen to books. Back in the old day you just had to read the books. Today you can listen to them. And so my goal is I read a new book every single month when it comes to business, entrepreneur, time management, organization. In fact, I just finished a book called Taming the Mouse. It's about a theme park in China and the guy who goes in and turns it around. And then I just finished that and I bought it, and now we're studying it every one of my executive meetings with my team. And I'm in the middle of a book called The Advantage. I'm really excited about that. But I never stopped. I took every Stephen Covey tape. Back in the day, it was in the cassette tape. I took every one of his classes. I used Franklin Planner. I did everything. Today I watch TED Talks. I do podcasts. I look up videos. I try to educate myself to stay on the edge instead of always staying in the back. So don't stop doing that. Don't stop doing that. So the last one I'm going to tell you is another story, but let me just tell you this. I told you in the beginning that performance is the equalizer. Success. Here's my definition of success. Success equals hundreds of monotonous days of doing the right thing. Success equals hundreds of monotonous days of doing the right thing. Monotonous means drudgery, same thing. It's not fun. It's not always sexy. It's not always good. Success doesn't come in one or two events. It doesn't come because it's the flashy things that you see on TV. It comes because you're doing the right thing every single day. Okay, that is the definition of success. Success is not what you see on YouTube. It's not Gary Vee up there doing his thing. That is not it. Okay, and I follow him. I'm a Gary Vee guy, but that's not it. Just remember this. When I became a franchisee for Sonic, I was almost 40 years old. I had worked long and hard before I had my shot to go from 8 restaurants to 80. Okay, I went from 8 restaurants in one county to 80 restaurants in 7 states. But it had taken me all that time to get there before I could get to where I was going. Hundreds of monotonous days of doing the right thing. Now, I'll close with this story. Because this is a lot to do with business and a lot to do with attributes that I've learned. But I want to tell you something. On September 2nd of 2015, my family's life changed forever. At 1 o'clock in the morning, we got a knock on the door. And when I went to the door, at the door was a lady dressed in a little uniform with a patch on her breast pocket, and it said Clark County Coroner's Office. We lived in Las Vegas in Clark County. She was there at 1 in the morning to tell us that our youngest son, David, had been killed in a car accident that evening. Now, I want to tell you something. The worst possible thing that can happen to a parent, and for me as a father, because here's what happened. Over the next 72 hours, I was racked like Alma talks about, with the pains of some questions that only I could answer. And that was this: had I done everything as a father to prepare that boy to be in the spirit world? Even to this day, as I stand here, it's hard for me to believe that this 6'6" beautiful boy is in the spirit world. I just can't believe it. He had his mission call to Chihuahua, Mexico, and was killed before he could leave. I still today cannot believe I have a son in the spirit world. But what racked my soul was, had I done everything in my power to prepare my son to be in the spirit world? Now that took some real looking into it. Now I had done all the things that Dad's supposed to do. I was a scoutmaster. He got his duty to God. He got his Eagle Scout. He graduated from seminary. I baptized him, blessed him, gave him the priesthood, gave him the Melchizedek priesthood. I did all the things that a dad should do. But the thing that I worried most about, had I prepared my son to be in the spirit world? Had I prepared him to do the work that he was now being called to do? Have I done everything? Well, let me just tell you something. It didn't have anything to do with my career. My questions that were racking my soul weren't, Greg, did you make enough money? Could you have bought a nicer Mercedes? Could you have had another Hummer? Could you have gotten your son a better car? Could you have sent him to Harvard instead of BYU, Idaho? Could you have done these? None of that had nothing to do with money. In fact, there was not a check big enough I could write to bring my son back. Not one. And so I'm telling you that the things I've talked about, they apply to your family, they apply to your church, but they apply to business. But just remember this one thing: at the end of the day, it's important that you love your career, it's important that you learn to work hard, it's important that you know that performance is the equalizer. But at the end of the day, if those things are not applied in your own home and in your own family and in your own marriage, when something like that happened to me, that's the only question that I needed answered. Had I done everything possible to make sure my son was ready for the spirit world? So keep a balance, brothers and sisters. Keep a balance in your life, okay? And I want to finish with this, that I want you to know that the gospel is true and that you can still live in the world and know that it's true and be able to manage in it. The hospitality industry that I've chosen in my life is tough, and it's not LDS friendly. It's not LDS friendly because you're going to have to work nights, you're going to have to work weekends. If you do it now, you won't have to do it forever. But you might have to work some Sundays, and you might have to work some nights, and you might have to skip some Christmases. My first 10 Christmases when I was married, I worked every Christmas. Worked every Christmas Eve. That's just how it was in my world. We didn't know any different. But I want you to know that you can have both. You can live the gospel and its purposes and still have the career that you want. That is what I know for sure. I'm grateful to be here, and I love this university, and I leave that and all of this with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
How do you balance career and family when you were starting?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I get that a lot about how do you balance family, career, and what have you. So in one of my classes right now, there's a group who is creating a restaurant that's called the 90s Ice Cream Shop or something like that. I don't even remember the 90s because all I did was work in church and family. That's all I did. And so what happened to me as a father is that I had to boil down my priorities. I had work, I had my family, and I had my church callings. And I think Elder Bednar says it best. If you look this up, he gives a talk about this and even writes about it. If you compartmentalize those, when you're at work, be at work. When you're at home, be at home. When you're doing your calling, do your calling. Do those things, and you can have it all. Now, when I was young, I missed a lot of things that I wish I hadn't missed, but I learned from them and I corrected them later. But you can have it all. But you might have to give up your video gaming. You might have to give up, as I did. I had a lot of hobbies that I loved. I liked to hunt. I liked guns. I liked those kinds of things. And I liked going golfing. I loved to golf. But there was a time in my life when I gave up that because I couldn't do them all. I couldn't do them all. I don't know if that answers your question. That's just the Greg Maples formula. It doesn't mean it's the formula. Yes, ma'am.
So how, you talked a lot about how you had different progression, different opportunities arise. How did those opportunities arise? Were you applying for them and looking for those new jobs and for those new positions? Or did they just kind of come to you?
So, as you know from the story when I first took over, when I first became the pan-up guy for the La Petite Boulangerie, I was just looking for a sandwich. For me, that's one of the ways I knew I was guided there, because I never would have chosen that industry ever. But I have to tell you something. I'm a bit of a type A, go get 'em kind of guy, and so I was always looking for the next move. So I was looking for it, but it didn't always come the way I wanted. Like, for example, when I was a area manager, the next step above me was a regional vice president. And so that was what I had my goal on. And so every time when one would come up, I would interview for it. But what the Lord was doing is saying, no, you're going to go over here and work in the franchise side of the business. You're going to be a regional franchise guy instead of a regional operations guy. But I was always working and I wanted to progress. I wanted to. And let me tell you the other thing. I had 6 kids. You guys are expensive. I had to be able to afford cars and houses and places, and when you have 6 kids, you can't just put them in a Corolla anymore. And so I had to climb the ladder, and so I was always looking. I was always pushing. Yes, sir.
What actually made you leave Jack in the Box? Was it business?
Oh, thank you for that question. Why did I leave Jack in the Box? So I had a friend of mine who came to me. He was in the stake presidency. I was the stake young men's president. And we became friends. And he was a franchisee for Sonic, and I worked for Jack in the Box. And he used to tease me about that I worked for somebody and that I didn't actually own my own business. We'd have, back then in the stake dances, we'd have DJs, and you'd have to pay the DJs. And he would come up to me every time and he'd say, hey, I need to pay the DJ. Do you have any cash? And then he'd say, oh, that's right, you work for somebody. I got it. And then he'd pull out this wad of money. And I'm like, oh. And I pulled up in my really nice company car, and he pulled up in his convertible Mercedes, and he'd say, oh, hey, nice, whatever that is, and I just hated that. And so one day he called me up and he said, look, I love you, and you're obviously good at what you do. He said, would you want to be my partner at Sonic? Trish and I had to sit, pray, decide, but we decided at that point we would leave Jack in the Box and become a partner in 8 Sonic drive-ins. So I left the corporate world to become an owner of a business. And that's when I went from 8 Sonic drive-ins to 80 in 8 years. That was that growth path. So that's how I got into it. Yeah. If it wasn't for that, meeting David, I would never have left Jack in the Box.
Especially as you were in your early career, this question, did your wife work? And she didn't, do you think she could have?
That's a great question. And so I will answer it this way, that in the 80s and 90s, it was a little different than it was today. My wife was raising 6 children. I had it easy. So she had the really tough job, but she is a very independent woman. If anybody knows my wife, she's very independent. In fact, this is a woman who bought a house and didn't tell me until it was time to close. Okay? She's bought cars, and I didn't even know it until I got home. Okay? She's very independent, and I love her that way. If I couldn't go on a vacation, she'd get in the car and take the kids and go. I'd say, where are you guys going? We're going to Disney World. I'll be back in a week. Oh, she goes, well, I know you can't go. You got all this business stuff, but I'm not going to live my life waiting for you. So she just went. But as our kids got older, she wanted to do something, so she got into real estate because you have better with your timing. Now, if my wife had decided that she wanted to go to work, we would have made it work. We could have made it work because we had family around us. And those are tough questions that only can be worked out between spouses and where they want to go and what have you. But my wife today, she owns the Hukilau salon right there in the marketplace. She owns that, does a great job. And by the way, she didn't get to finish her college because we got married and we had so many darn kids. And so just 2 years ago, actually 4 years ago, she went back to school. And a year ago, July, she graduated from BYU, Idaho, with a degree in business and entrepreneur. So, and she's a hard worker. So I think the answer is yes, we could have. It was just different then. Today, you almost have to have 2 careers to be able to survive, especially if it's inside here. But I think we could have done it. Anybody else? Okay. Good. Thank you so much.